Hi everybody, Andrew Cuneo here. It's been a while since I've made a standard video. I have been trying to play the format some because of the arena qualifier that's coming up. And I've tried brewing a bunch of my own decks. It really hasn't gone very well. The kind of the known decks I think are the best decks at this point. I don't know that there's much in the way of surprises that people are still gonna find in the format. So for a while, I was of the opinion that Grixis is just the best deck. And this past weekend, we had the regional championships in Southeast Asia and Japan, I believe, are the two regions. And Grixis was the most popular deck at both of those. It didn't put up very good win rates. It did wind up putting a bunch of people in the top 8 of, I believe it was the Southeast Asia regional one. And I think someone won with it, but it overall didn't have a great win rate. But I still think it's probably going to be my choice for the arena qualifiers that are coming up. And I think that part of it is just that it's not going to have that much of a target on its back, whereas going into those tournaments, everybody knew it was going to be the most popular deck. I think that Standard's going to be a little bit more wide open now, so it'll be a little bit less targeted. I have tried a couple of different variations on Grixis just to try to find out what I liked about it. This build that's up on the screen right now is the build that I currently am leaning towards. It's not really that different than what most people play in Grixis. I started off with a build from a Magic Online user, Mogged, who wrote an article about it, and I played basically their list for a while, and over time I've changed a few cards. So I think the one thing that is a little bit different about my build, which I do think is an important thing to do, is I am not playing a Takenuma in my mana base. I'm just playing an additional Shipwreck Marsh. It's really just, I found that Takenuma, or not Takenuma, sorry, I'm not playing an Otawara, the blue one. I'm not playing the blue channel land, just because I found a land that only tapped for blue mana was just terrible, both for casting Invoke Despair and for allowing you to cast a turn 2 Bloodtithe Harvester, especially just with some of the land sequencing. If you potentially wanted to, play Cut Down on turn 1, I guess that maybe doesn't matter that much with the Otawara. But just, I found that you never really wanted to channel Otawara. It just wasn't useful. And having another land that didn't tap for black in the deck was just bad. So I just switched an Otawara to a Shipwreck Marsh. And then I also wound up adding 2 Siphon Insights to my main deck. And this, I think the original build had like a Liliana in it and maybe another creature removal spell or something. And I just wanted to make my deck better in the Grixis mirror, so I just put Siphon Insight in my main deck. And I think that's fine. I'm a little bit on the fence as to whether it's still a good idea, given that I'm expecting Grixis to fall off a little bit after this past weekend. One thing I will say about it is this is a deck that you really want to make your first 5 land drops. And I'm only playing 26 lands in my deck. Some people play 27. But with the 2 Siphon Insights, you can use them to make your land drops in the early turns of the game. It's not, the ideal use of that card, but it is, if you're on the fence between 26 and 27 lands, I think having Siphon Insight in your deck is a way to kind of break the tie and wind up on 26 lands. Outside of that, I don't have all that much going on that's a little bit strange. I am playing a Spell Pierce and a Negate, which is something I copied from this original user Mogged's list, and I think some people have moved away from that. I've been really happy with playing 1 Spell Pierce in the main deck. I think you wind up getting to play your spells a little bit more aggressively and kind of catch your opponent with Spell Pierce sometimes, where it's hard for them to play around, because I think some people realize that it's maybe going to be a one-of in the Grixis deck, but nobody's expecting you to have a ton of them, so you're going to get to play it in spots where your opponent really doesn't feel like they should play around it, or they feel like they can't play around it. And this is also a deck that, even though you tend to play long games, you've got a lot of control over, cards in your hand. You can loot the Spell Pierce away to Fable the Mirror Breaker. You can loot it away to blood tokens. You also have some amount of, you're going to get to see a bunch of cards. So probably you wouldn't pick Spell Pierce off of a Corpse Appraiser, but, you might. So just having some options. Also, this is not a great use, but you can stack it with the Make Disappear if it's a spell you really need to counter. So I'm definitely, if I was going to play Grixis, I would 100% play one Spell Pierce in my 75 and just play it in the main deck. A card I went back and forth on is Blue Sun's Twilight. At first, I thought it was in the list mostly to be good in Grixis mirrors, and I didn't find it to be particularly good in Grixis mirrors. But I think what it's really in the list for is to be good against the white, like the more controlling or mid-range white decks, where this is a really good answer to AO. It's also pretty good against, I think the name of the card is Sarah Protector, the 3/4 that kind of works like a Luris. In those sort of matchups where the game's going to go a long time, you're going to get to 7 mana, so you can play this for 5 or more. This is a pretty big haymaker. So I played for a while without it, and then I eventually went back to having one in my main deck and one in my sideboard. And I've been pretty impressed with it. Is there anything else that's noteworthy? I guess the 3 Invoke Despairs, 1 Bladecoil Serpent split is another thing I copied from Mog, and I've been happy with that. I think that there are some matchups where Invoke Despair is really good, but there's a lot of matchups where it isn't that good. And there's a big overlap with the matchups where Invoke Despair is good and where Bladecoil Serpent is good. But I don't think you really want more than 4 of this kind of thing. And when you're playing the Grixis mirror, Bladecoil Serpent can be just absolutely backbreaking. It really shines there. So I think that's pretty... It's pretty nice. It's also nice when you have a bunch of expensive cards in your deck to have them do slightly different things if they're of similar power levels. And maybe Bladecoil Serpent's a little bit worse than Invoke Despair, but it is a way that you can kind of choose which card is the one you want to cast. If you have them both in your hands, you can kind of craft your game plan differently depending on which one you draw. I think having a little bit of versatility there makes sense. Before we jump into the sideboard, I guess I was going to say that I also tried a couple of other builds of Grixis where I deviated more from this original build. So one of the builds I tried was, this is literally just cutting the Siphon Insights for Graveyard Trespassers, because I wanted to see if Graveyard Trespasser was a card that's a little bit better positioned now that it seems like people are playing a little bit less Grixis, a little bit less of the kind of bigger mid-range decks like Mono White and Atraxa, and there's more aggressive decks in the form of Mono Red and the Toxic White-Green deck. And I think it's true that that is the way that the metagame is probably going to shift. Graveyard Trespasser was okay. It was nothing special. I think if you want to make your deck a little bit lower to the ground, which in a second I'll show you a lower to the ground version, you can do this, but I think I'd still prefer just playing the Siphon Insights. I did go deeper with the Graveyard Trespassers into this third build, where I'm trying to just play Graveyard Trespassers in my main deck, and I've cut all of my top end, and I'm playing Sheoldreds in my main deck. And I've moved the Invoke Despairs into my sideboard because at first I played with literally no Invoke Despairs in my main deck. And then I eventually realized that when you do get paired against those mono white decks, it's pretty important to have Invoke Despair. And also when you play the Grixis Mirror, I would say Invoke Despair isn't like it isn't maybe a necessary card, but having really high impact expensive cards is very important for that matchup. And Invoke Despair is a good version of a high impact card, and given that it's a card you actively want against the mono white deck, I think that this is a fine sideboard card to have to also board in against Grixis. I ultimately just wasn't that impressed by this build. I felt like what you gain against the more aggressive decks by doing this, you more than lose in terms of hurting your matchup against other Grixis decks and against the other mid-range decks. I think you're better off being the original build I showed and having sideboard options to get better against the more aggressive decks. But if you were literally just preparing and you thought that, you know, you're just going to see a little bit of Grixis, a little bit of mono white, mostly mono red, mostly green white toxic, maybe a little blue white soldiers, maybe you'd want to go with the no Invoke Despair main deck. That said, this is the build that I'm currently regarding as my best build of Grixis. Moving into the sideboard, nothing too unusual here. I guess the little bit of oddities that I've got are, I've got one Syncopate, which this is kind of a pet card of mine in this standard, where this is in my sideboard because I wanted to be able to board in more permission against Atraxa decks, because to beat the Atraxa decks, I think you really want to be able to counter their whatever they're doing to put the Atraxa into play, which is generally going to be trying to get it back with Cruelty of Gix, but some decks try to cast it. And I specifically wanted to play with Syncopate as an additional counter because I want as many of my counters to be able to hit a turn 3 Fable of the Mirror Breaker when I'm on the draw as possible, and Syncopate does that. I do also have 2 Disdainful Strokes, which is mostly against Atraxa-based decks. There's also occasionally you play against a white, it's usually like white, blue, red, sometimes it's just white, blue, control deck that tries to use Mind Link Apparatus and White Sun's Twilight to kill you, and their Disdainful Stroke's obviously great. I do usually wind up boarding in some, like 1 to 2 Disdainful Strokes in the Grixis mirror because being able to counter the Haymakers does matter a lot. I'm going to say that it's kind of awkward in that matchup because they generally have, everybody has Duress in some numbers after sideboard, and once they Duress you and see that you have a Disdainful Stroke, it's really hard to get the Disdainful Stroke to ever line up against their Invoke Despairs or Bladecoil Serpents. Like, they're only ever going to play into your Disdainful Stroke at that point if they literally have nothing else to spend their mana on, and they have another Haymaker they're going to play the next turn after. So, it's not a great sideboard card against Grixis. It is an okay sideboard card against Grixis. And then I've got one Saheeli, which for a while I couldn't figure out what the point of it was, but it is a decent sideboard card against Grixis and the mono white deck. Then I've got another Blue Sun's Twilight. Like I said, that is against primarily against white mid-range decks. You can also board it in against like mono red. It's going to serve you better than an Invoke Despair against mono red, I would say. I've got 2 Brotherhood's Inns, the Sweepers. That's fairly standard. Some people have them in the main deck of Grixis. I've got them in my sideboard. Only one Sheoldred. If there was a card I would like to add to the 75, it would be a second Sheoldred, either in the main deck or the sideboard. One thing you could do is just ditch a Siphon Insight for a Sheoldred in the main deck. I got a couple Parasitic Grasps, which I think this is a really important sideboard card for black decks against aggressive red decks, against the kind of Esper Legends deck, which generally has a lot of humans in it. I think you obviously want to start with 4 cut downs, but once you move past the 4 cut downs, I think Parasitic Grasp is the next place you want to be looking. Only one Unlicensed Hearse. This card does not impress me particularly as a sideboard card in this standard. I sometimes play against people who board it in the Grixis mirror, which it seems really, it's not 100% useless, but it seems quite bad in that matchup. I think it's pretty bad if you're playing Grixis against the mono white deck. I don't board it in there either. The only place that I really like it is against the people who are really trying to use Cruelty of Gix to reanimate Atraxa. And even there, it's not that good. This would probably be the first card that I would cut from my sideboard if I really wanted to make room for the second Sheoldred. So that's my build of Grixis. I'm going to run it through a few matches, and we'll see if any other interesting stuff comes up. I have been kind of hesitant to make a video about Grixis just because I think it's such a known entity at this point. But I suppose I have a few minor variations on what other people have already said and done. This is obviously a mulligan. This deck does mulligan pretty well. I think I'm just going to get rid of Invoke Despair for now. So this is going to be... Oh, it's not... I thought it was going to be white-green Toxic. It's not. It's going to be like a white-green Humans deck. I started with a white-green Humans deck at the start of this format. And... I thought it was okay. I thought it was worse than the white-blue Soldiers deck. Oh, they've got red in their deck. I wonder if they have Fable the Mirror Breaker. This game seems like it's pretty much a lost cause, assuming they have anything they can cast this turn. Skrelv. Yeah, this game is definitely a lost cause at this point. This was a game where I mulled. So I mulled into a hand that lined up pretty bad with them having a turn 2 Thalia. And it's led to me getting beaten senseless. All right. With my configuration, I'm expecting to lose game 1 against the aggro decks a lot of the time, or I mean, more than you would against a version of more than you would with a version of Grixis that was slanted towards beating the aggro decks. So those are all cards that I've removed. All the cards I really don't want. And I've added the Parasitic Grasps and the Sheoldred. I also would like the Brotherhood's Ends and the Cut Downs. And the Blue Sun's Twilight. I think that against a lot of the really aggressive decks, Blue Sun's Twilight just plays better than Invoke Despair. I wouldn't hate having Invoke Despair in my deck in some amount, but I think I'm going to stick with Make Disappear, certainly on the play. This is another awkward hand where I'm not going to have access to 2 mana on turn 2. I think my spells are strong enough that I'm still going to keep it. Maybe I draw an untapped land. Yeah, I drew an untapped land. And they didn't have a 1-drop. This should be a game that I win pretty easily, would be my guess. But we'll have to see how it plays out in reality. I'm going to go ahead and attack here, see if they're interested in trading. Ideally, they would trade, and then I would be able to play a Corpse Appraiser this turn. Sadly, they did not. I'm going to hold the Corpse Appraiser for next turn. I guess I don't even... I'm not even guaranteed to get the Corpse Appraiser. Although, a lot of the things they could play, I'm just going to Bloodtithe Harvester. Ooh, wedding announcement. So maybe this isn't going to go great. Do I want to loot away a Corpse Appraiser just to be able to Corpse Appraise? Yeah, I think so. Definitely want to have access to 5 mana next turn, so I can potentially Blue Sun's Twilight like an Adeline. Do I want the Fable or do I want a Bankbuster? I think I want the Fable. I'm going to attack and see what they do. kind of feeling that they might choose to block with the Mire here, just because they don't want to take too much damage. I think if they don't block, I'm going to Blue Sun's Twilight the Skrelv and just play the Bloodtithe Harvester. Given that they blocked like that, I think I'm going to play Fable of the Mirror Breaker instead. Next turn I'm very likely to just cut down the Skrelv, which means I'm probably not going to be able to play Blue Sun's Twilight on my next turn. But that's okay. Okay. So one thing I can do here is I can potentially just leave the Loran alive, and I might be able to Blue Sun's Twilight the Loran for 5, which would produce a second Loran, which I could use to destroy the Wedding Festivity. Obviously, it would then get legend ruled. I need to draw an untapped land for... Well, I need a land that's going to be untapped on next turn to do that. I do have. I guess I'll just cut down the Skrelv now. If they'd had Tiver's Stand, it would have been really bad for me there. But if I wait, they can potentially use Plaza of Heroes, which probably they're not going to win a game if they're using Plaza of Heroes on their turn next turn, but they probably also don't have Tiver's Stand in their deck. Ooh. That's actually going to be a juicier target, I think, for the... I'm feeling bad now that I didn't Bloodtithe Harvester that, but so it goes. There's no point to doing that for 5 because there's no value to me in getting a second Halana that immediately gets legend ruled. I might wind up cycling this. I think it was a close decision whether or not to play it. Just remember, I do have... I can spend mana on this Bankbuster to get cards as needed. Oh no, it's Sigarda. This is getting a little bit rough. So I can kill the Sigarda by using the Bloodtithe Harvester and the Brotherhood's End. Problem with doing that, though, is that they're going to get to keep a Loran. Yeah, I guess I'm going to go ahead and do this. I think I'm going to lose now. I'm going to play this land. I might need to emergency cycle into a Go for the Throat to not die. They also have the Plaza of Heroes, which my Corpse Appraiser is big enough that could block. Jeez, they just had it all? That was the answer to what they had, was it all? Okay. That really didn't go great. Now I get to play against the actual Toxic deck. It's pretty important that you kill these things whenever you can. Theirs is a deck that definitely has Tiffer's Stand in it. Thankfully they didn't have a turn 2 Skrell's Hive. That's like the scariest card for sure. Sadly, they do have that thing. Okay. I'll need some cards that aren't lands here. I think Spell Pierce is exactly what I needed. Okay. I guess they deal the same amount of toxic by doing that. It's kind of, let's say, unnecessary. And I suppose I shouldn't have played the Xander's Lounge. Drawing a land and having the Bankbuster be exiled made playing that look pretty foolish. I'm going to take the Invoke Despairs out of my deck as well. They both are they're gonna have Scrollchives and Wedding Announcements. But I think you need to be much more focused on winning, like staying ahead early on in the game to do well in this matchup. Parasitic Grasp, probably not. I think Duress is probably better. Parasitic Grasp doesn't, I don't think hits any of their stuff for just 2 mana. All their cards are Phyrexians, not humans. Duress is a mana efficient way at least to pick off Wedding Announcement and Scrollchive. Also, they're going to have Tyvar's Stand in their deck 100% of the time. I'm not going to keep a 1-lander. I lied. I am going to keep a 1-lander. This 1-lander actually is probably bad enough. I'm going to go to 5. I don't often go to 5. If I draw an untapped land for next turn, I might actually have a shot. It might make me look foolish here and play Scrollchive. I'm willing to risk it to potentially pick off a Jawbone Duelist or a Skrelv or a Rot Priest. Rot Priest is kind of annoying. I'm going to target it, but if they have Tiver's Stand, it goes badly. They do not appear to have that. And I drew the untapped land. Wow. Things finally turned around for me. I'm going to take Sheoldred. I boarded it in this matchup because I do think you just want a good blocker / fast clock. Because of stuff like Skrell's Hive. They're going to chump? Wow. They needed to do that. I was going to be happy with just playing the Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So once they do get me to Toxic, they're going to have all these seed cores, which are going to be kind of annoying, for sure. They don't even have Tiver's Stand. They just want to Toxic this badly. Might work out for them. That seemed really aggressive to me. I mean, maybe they thought I wouldn't block, but I did block. This game might be hard to win. If they hadn't had the Bloated Contaminator that turn, I thought I was going to be in good shape. With the Bloated Contaminator, I think it's a little rough for me. Let's see if they actually decide to block. This would be a horrific block by the opponent if they block with the Bloated Contaminator this turn. I'm essentially playing with my Brotherhood's End face up, which, to their credit, they realized. If I had just been able to get the Bloated Contaminator off the board, this actually would have been a pretty easy game, I think. This again seems unnecessarily aggressive. I guess they're gaining, they do gain a decent amount of life, but I don't know. Feels like they're giving up any hope of having a board presence that can attack for a reasonable amount. That was actually a bad attack on my part. Should not have done that. I'm just going to swing back and gain all the life back from the seed cores. I have no idea what this card is. Why is it in their deck? Wait a second. This just shut off all the seed cores. Weird. Ideally, I'm not forced to block with the Bloodtithe Harvester or the Reflection of Kiki Jiki this next turn, but we'll see. What does this activated ability do? Are they going to sack King Darien to turn back on the seed cores? No, they're just going to gain life. Okay. So I take Blue Sun's Twilight. Just steal a creature token. This turn, that's not that appealing, but next turn I could maybe steal an Anax Sentry. If I draw an untapped land. That could be good. This is such a weird attack. I'm not even going to block with the Sheoldred just because I don't want the Sheoldred to die. Okay, I forced them to sack this thing so they can get back to using their seed cores. This King Darien does not seem like a good inclusion in their deck. Second Skrill's Hive. Should I just take the Annex Sentry? This thing becomes a 3/2. I guess it means I get to block with it. So they go to 10. They're actually kind of priced. Actually, they go to 8 and then down to 6 on their next draw step. So they are priced into attacking with the Seed Core now. Oh no, I was going to say they could Annex Sentry and Annex Sentry that I stole, and then it would be bad for me because when I killed this one, they would get a new one back and they could Annex Sentry something else, but they didn't do that. I think I'm going to hang back and block with the Bloodtithe Harvester, and I'll save it with Cut Down. Had I attacked more aggressively there, I think it would have been bad. I'm going to lose all 4 tokens this turn and gain 6 life. And have to spend 2 mana, so they're not going to be able to use Murex. Good. Yeah, they lose this one too. Skrill, that's going to die to Bloodtithe Harvester. Well, to my copied Bloodtithe Harvester, rather. Attack more aggressively. Doesn't seem necessary. I think the game's to a game state where I can't lose if I just play defensively. Question is, should I abrade this? They seem to want to use their mana for something. So they're going to be going up to 13, but really 11 because of the Sheoldred trigger, and I could attack for 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I think I'm going to save this just for whatever they're going to play. Because I don't think I actually kill them. Oh wait, they're just planning to use Murex. That's fine. This isn't the fastest way to deal damage to my opponent, using my mana just to kill their tokens like this. But this is more of the same theory of just play super defensively, I probably can't lose. There's no way they have charge in the mites here. They would have used it to kill the Bloodtithe Harvester. Down to 6. They can gain 6 life. Up to 12, but I think I'm going to be able to deal them 12, or really I only have to deal them 10, because again, Sheoldred's going to trigger in their upkeep. I guess I created a window where if they'd drawn Tiver's Stand that turn, would it have maybe been bad for me? This is... they're just dead on board, right? I think so. Let's not do any math. It seems like they're dead. They're dead by a lot. I think I might have lost that game if my opponent had played a little bit better on some of the earlier turns. I didn't see anything unexpected. Well, I saw that King Darien, actually. That was unexpected and potentially lost my opponent the game. But I'm not going to adjust my sideboarding to board in Parasitic Grasp just because King Darien's a human. Sounds fine. I'll have access to 2 untapped mana on turn 2 because of the Sulfurous Springs. If they play Skrull's Hive on this turn, I'm going to probably lose to it. They did not. That was a pretty good start, though. Do I want to sit on Make Disappear? I don't think that's a good idea. I think I should just kill these things while I can. Well, I'm guaranteed that it's going to work. It's possible this goes bad if they have like land bloated Contaminator. I don't know that there's that many other things they could play that would really be that bad for me. I'm going to try to get them a little bit, to go a little bit deeper into things that I can Brotherhoods, and I think I just want to make my land drop next turn. For sure. This doesn't feel great, but Skrull's Hive is really effective against what my hand has going on. I'm going to take the token too. X is 0. Gimme. And I'm going to play this land in case I want to play, in case I draw an untapped land and want to play Blue Sun's Twilight for 5 next turn. Oh no, another Skrull's Hive. That is going to be problematic to say the least. They must have drawn Running Skrull's Hives, because they didn't have one in their hand like 2 turns ago. 2 or 3 turns ago. Okay, that gives me some hope. Untapped land wouldn't be the worst here. I definitely lose to Tiffer's Stand if they have it this turn. They're getting priority. That is a bad sign. Why were they getting priority if they didn't have Tiffer's Stand? They have, like, Destroy Evil, maybe? Okay. Do you think I can poison them out before they poison me out? Probably not, given that my only toxic creature just died. Come on, no Seed Core, no Seed Core, no Seed Core. Thinking about whether or not I wanted to Bankbuster to draw a card, but I think I'm just going to use the Bankbuster to block the Jawbone Duelist potentially. King Darian's actually somewhat effective here, shockingly. Alright, I promise not to kill any of your tokens this turn, opponent. Need them to draw nothing this turn. Brick. Jawbone Duelist. Not a brick, but honestly it could be worse. Could be a lot worse. Do I have lethal for next turn? I do if they don't gain life. Don't play a blocker. I think, right? I need 9 attackers. Yeah, I definitely have it. As long as I don't misclick. I'm capable of misclicking here. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Against an unknown opponent, no red mana, but a 2 mana play into another 2 mana play for the next turn. Seems fine. Opponent on a mull to 6. They led on just a regular swamp, which is a pretty strong indication they're playing like mono black or maybe black red. fact that they have mountains in their mono black deck would be very suspicious. It seems like they're playing black-red. I want to give them another opportunity to Abrade. I think I'm just going to leave up Go for the Throat. I think it's really likely they play something I can target with Go for the Throat. And then I might want to just Corpse Appraiser on my turn. Oh no, they got me. They just played a Bankbuster. Kind of -2 mana there. Well, I am -2 mana there. But also they had an awful turn 3, so didn't really fall behind. The only way this really hurts me is if this card in particular had been Abrade. It would have been really punishing because I could have drawn into the Abrade and abraded the Bankbuster before they ever got to use it. Rather than playing Invoke Despair there, I am just leaving up Negate, essentially, and, you know, getting the Fable and the Mirror Breaker further along. That's something I'm always a little bit unsure about with Invoke Despair. I mean, it's usually better if you kill a creature and get to draw a little bit. That's usually more appealing than just drawing 3. So this is like, we saw red-black, just removal. I think I'm going to guess that this is like a red-black deck that's trying to reanimate Atraxa. But it's kind of hard to say from what we saw. I'm going to take out my cut downs. Boarding counters. I'm going to take out Blue Sun's Twilight. The question is, do I want to bring in like Hearse and Duresses? Maybe Saheeli even. Yeah, let's do this. I'm going to board out Bloodtithe Harvester. I'm like, again, I'm guessing that my opponent's deck's not going to have a lot of creatures and is going to have a lot of creature removal, which they're probably boarding some of it out right now, but they're not going to take it all out. And Bloodtithe Harvester is a little bit lackluster in games where there aren't really many creatures to kill. This is one of those hands where Spell Pierce is a little bit awkward. But I think still fine. This is certainly going to deal me a bunch of damage. Usually it doesn't wind up mattering that much, unless I've really misjudged my opponent's deck. Right, they do have Sheoldred in their deck as well, so maybe they're just more like a black-red mid-range deck. Just discarded a Sheoldred. I'm going to just leave all my mana up. Maybe Syncopate something, maybe cycle Xander's Lounge. The card that would really punish me there if I played the Bloodtithe Harvester and only left Spell Pierce up would be another Sheoldred. This works out fine too. Okay. I'm going to play one of these Xander's Lounges because I don't think I'm very likely to find enough time to cycle 2 of them. Spell Pierce, saving the day. Wow! I don't know if my opponent would have conceded if they'd seen my hand. Man, I guess Invoke Despair was going to be good enough. Well, that's my take on Grixis. I hope you enjoyed the videos. I do think Grixis is an extremely good deck. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are not of the opinion that it's the best deck. So far, it's been the best deck for me, though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.